The orc girl's lips were still warm against his cheek when she whispered the words that would reshape both their lives, her small fingers digging into the rough fabric of his coat as the autumn fair swirled around them in a chaos of livestock and haggling voices. Kade Ashford had come to the horse fair in the borderlands for rope and lamp oil, nothing more, certainly not to be pulled into the desperate gambit of a green-skinned woman he had never seen before. But her eyes held something he recognized, something he had worn himself for years, until he learned to bury it deep. The trapped animal panic of someone being claimed against their will. So when she pressed herself against him and breathed, "Please do not let go," into the space between his shoulder and jaw, he did the only thing his conscience would allow. He wrapped one arm around her waist and held on. The man who had been following her stopped 3 paces away, his face darkening. He was orc as well, taller than the woman by a head, with shoulders that spoke of hammer work or plow work or both. His tusks were prominent, filed to points in the old way, and his hands opened and closed at his sides as though searching for a weapon or a throat. "Hessa Blackthorn," the man said, his voice carrying over the noise of the fair. "Step away from the human." The woman, Hessa, turned in Kade's arm but did not pull free. Her own tusks were small, barely visible past her lips, and her build was compact and lean like a runner's. Her hair was black and tied back in a warrior's braid, and when she spoke her voice did not shake. "I have made my choice, Garruk. Go tell my clan I have found someone. Your father promised you to me." Garruk's accent was thicker, his words shaped by a mouth built for a different language. "Before he died, he gave his word. My father is dead." Hessa's fingers tightened on Kade's coat. "And I owe you nothing." Garruk's gaze shifted to Kade, measuring him. Kade met the look without expression. He was a big man by human standards, broad through the chest and arms, with work-scarred hands and the kind of quietness that came from years of keeping his thoughts to himself. He had learned young that words invited questions, and questions invited trouble. "You claim her?" Garruk asked. Kade felt Hessa go still against him. He knew what she was asking, what this moment required, and he knew also that lies had a way of taking root and growing into something you could not pull free. But her hand was still gripping his coat, and her breathing was still too fast. And somewhere in his memory, a boy's voice was screaming as men in leather aprons loaded him into a wagon to settle a debt his dead father owed. "Yes," Kade said. The word hung in the air between them. Garruk's jaw worked, grinding his tusks together, and for a moment Kade thought the orc would come at him right there among the horse pens and merchant stalls. But Garruk only smiled, cold and knowing. "Then you will prove it," he said. "At the autumn moot, under clan law. 3 labors to show you are worthy. If you fail, she comes to me as was promised." Before Kade could answer, before Hessa could protest, Garruk turned and walked away, his broad back disappearing into the crowd. Hessa pulled free of Kade's arm and spun to face him. Up close, he could see the green of her skin was not uniform but varied, darker across her cheekbones and the bridge of her nose where the sun had touched it, paler along her throat. Her eyes were amber, flecked with gold, and they were searching his face now as though trying to read something written there. "I am sorry," she said. "I should not have done that. I should not have pulled you into this. But you did." "Yes." She looked away, toward the place where Garruk had vanished. "He has been following me for weeks, ever since the funeral rites. He says my father promised me to him in marriage, says there were witnesses, but I never heard such a promise and my mother never heard it either. But Garruk is the clan champion and his word carries weight. And mine does not." It was not a question. Hessa's mouth tightened and she shook her head. "Not to my clan, no. You are human and an outsider, but you gave me a way out at least for now, and I will not forget that." She reached into the pouch at her belt and pulled out a small handful of silver coins. "Here, for your trouble." Kade looked at the coins, then at her face. "Keep it. I owe you. You do not owe me money." "Then what do I owe you?" There was frustration in her voice now, and something else, something that might have been shame or might have been fear. "You just bound yourself to 3 labors you know nothing about, for a woman you do not know. Why?" Kade picked up the coil of rope he had been inspecting before she kissed him, testing its weight and the tightness of its weave. He did not look at her when he answered, because no one should be claimed like goods. The words came out flat, without inflection, but Hessa went very still. When he glanced at her, she was studying him again, her amber eyes narrowed, and he could see her reassessing whatever conclusions she had drawn. "You know what it is like," she said quietly, "to be treated as property." "Yes." She waited, clearly hoping he would elaborate, but Kade only turned to the merchant and paid for the rope. When he turned back, Hessa was still there, her arms crossed over her chest, her expression caught between gratitude and exasperation. "The autumn moot is in 6 weeks, she said. "Garruk will name the labors then in front of the clan elders. You do not have to come. You could leave the borderlands, go south or east, and no one would follow. I would tell them you changed your mind." "Is that what you want?" "No." The word came out quickly, almost before he finished asking. "But it is not fair to ask you to fight my battles. I already said I would. You did not know what you were agreeing to." Kade slung the rope over his shoulder and met her eyes. "I know now." For a long moment they stood there in the middle of the horse fair, the noise and motion of the crowd flowing around them like water around stones. Finally, Hessa nodded, once sharply. "Then I will take you to meet my mother," she said. "If you are going to stand as my claimant, you will need to know what you are fighting for." The Blackthorn homestead was a day's walk north of the fair, nestled in a valley where the grasslands gave way to pine forest and rocky hills. The house itself was built of logs and stone, low and solid, with a sod roof that blended into the hillside behind it. A barn and a chicken coop stood nearby, and beyond them, Kade could see fields of barley and rye, the grain already harvested and the stubble dry and gold in the autumn light. Hessa's mother was waiting by the door when they arrived, her arms folded across her chest in a posture that mirrored her daughter's. She was older, her green skin lined around the eyes and mouth, her hair shot through with gray, but she carried herself with the same compact strength, and her amber eyes held the same fierce intelligence. "So this is the human," she said in common, her accent softer than Garruk's but still present. "The one who claimed my daughter at the fair." "I claimed myself, mother," Hessa said. "He only agreed to stand for me, against Garruk." The older woman's gaze did not leave Kade's face. "Do you know what you have done, human, Kade?" he said. "My name is Kade Ashford." "Do you know what you have done, Kade Ashford?" "He saved me from being handed over like a broodmare," Hessa snapped. "That is what he did." Her mother's expression softened fractionally. "Come inside," she said. "Both of you. If we are going to discuss this, we will do it over a meal." The inside of the house was warmer than Kade expected, heated by a large stone hearth that took up most of one wall. The furniture was simple but well made, and the walls were hung with woven blankets in geometric patterns of red and gold and black. Hessa's mother, whose name was Marna Blackthorn, set out bread and cheese and cold mutton while Hessa poured ale into wooden cups. "Garruk came here 3 days ago," Marna said as they sat at the table. "He said Torin promised Hessa to him before he died. He said there were witnesses from the war band, 2 of them, who heard Torin make the pledge." "Did my father ever speak of it to you?" Hessa demanded. "No, but Torin and I were not always in agreement about your future." Marna's voice was careful, neutral. He wanted you to marry within the clan to someone strong who could protect you. I wanted you to have a choice. And now Garruk is using father's death to force the issue. Yes. Marna looked at Kade. The clan will hold a moot in 6 weeks at the first frost. Garruk will present his witnesses and his claim. You will have to answer with proof of your own worthiness, or the elders will rule in his favor. What kind of proof? Kade asked. 3 labors. Garruk will name them, as is his right as the challenged party. They will be difficult, designed to test your strength and your commitment. Marna paused, her gaze sharpening. Most human men would not survive them. I am not most men. I see that. Marna took a drink from her cup, then set it down with deliberate care. Why are you doing this? Hessa is not your kin, not your betrothed, not even your friend. Why would you risk yourself for a stranger? Kade looked at the hearth, at the fire burning low and steady on its bed of stones. He thought of the carter's yard where he had spent 5 years, sleeping in the stable, eating whatever scraps the carter's wife deigned to throw him, and learning that his life belonged to someone else until the debt was paid. He thought of the way the carter had smiled when he told Kade he was free, as though releasing a dog from a chain was an act of great mercy. Because I know what it is like to be sold, he said finally, and I will not let it happen to someone else if I can stop it. Marna and Hessa exchanged a glance. When Marna spoke again, her voice had lost some of its edge. Then you will stay here until the moot, she said. It is only right. You should know the woman you are fighting for, and she should know you. If the elders rule in your favor, you will be bound to each other, at least in the eyes of the clan. Mother, Hessa said, a warning in her tone. It is the truth, daughter. If Kade completes the labors, the clan will expect you to honor the claim. That means marriage or something near enough to it. Marna looked at Kade again. Are you prepared for that? Kade considered. He had not thought past the moment in the fair, had not let himself imagine what would come after. But he had given his word, and his word was one of the few things he had never sold. Yes, he said. Hessa made a sound that was half laugh, half exasperation. You are both talking as though the labors are already complete. Garruk is not a fool. He will choose tasks that are nearly impossible, and if Kade fails, I will be handed over regardless. Then we make sure he does not fail, Marna said simply. Kade, you will sleep in the barn. Hessa will show you where we keep the tools and the livestock. In the morning, we will begin preparing. The next 6 weeks passed in a rhythm that was both strange and familiar to Kade. He rose before dawn to help with the animals, mucking out stalls and hauling water from the well. He mended fences and split firewood and learned the particular stubbornness of Marna's plow horse, an aging gelding named Stone who liked to stop in the middle of the field and refused to move until you bribed him with apples. Hessa worked beside him most days, quick and efficient, her small hands as strong as any man's. She did not talk much, but when she did her words were sharp and thoughtful, and Kade found himself listening more carefully than he had listened to anyone in years. At night, after the evening meal, Marna would tell stories of the clan, of their history and their laws and the old ways that still governed them. She told him of the 3 labors, which were an ancient tradition used to settle disputes over marriage rights or property. The labors were always named by the challenged party and judged by the elders at the moot. If the laborer succeeded in all 3, the challenge was answered and the matter settled. If he failed even one, the original claim stood. Garruk will try to break you, Marna said one evening, her voice low and serious. He will choose labors that test not just your body but your spirit. You must be ready for that. I am ready. Marna smiled, a small, sad expression. I think perhaps you are, but it will not be easy. Hessa, sitting by the fire with a piece of leather she was stitching into a new belt, glanced up at that. He knows it will not be easy, Mother. He is not a child. I know, but he is fighting for you, and I want him to understand what that means. I understand, Kade said quietly. The day of the moot arrived cold and clear, the first frost glittering on the grass like scattered diamonds. The gathering place was a natural amphitheater in the hills, a bowl of stone and earth where the clan had met for generations. By the time Kade and Hessa arrived, the space was already filled with orcs, perhaps 200 of them, their voices a low rumble of conversation. Kade felt their eyes on him as he walked past, felt the weight of their suspicion and their curiosity. He kept his gaze forward and his shoulders straight. The elders sat on a raised platform of stone at the center of the amphitheater, 5 of them, old and weathered and unreadable. Garruk stood before them, his arms crossed, his expression confident. When he saw Hessa and Kade, his smile widened. "The human came," he said loudly so the whole gathering could hear. "I did not think he would." "I gave my word," Kade said, one of the elders, a woman with white braids and a scar across her cheek, raised her hand for silence. The amphitheater quieted. "We are here to settle a disputed claim," the elder said. Her voice was dry and strong, like wind over stone. "Garruk of the Red Fang Band claims that Hessa Blackthorn promised his daughter Hessa in marriage, with witnesses to the pledge. Hessa contests this claim, and the human Kade Ashford stands as her claimant. Under clan law, Garruk may name 3 labors to test the claimant's worthiness. If the claimant succeeds in all 3, the claim is void and Hessa is free. If he fails, the original claim stands. Do all parties understand?" "We understand," Garruk said. Kade nodded. Beside him, Hessa was rigid, her hands clenched into fists. "Then name the labors," the elder said. Garruk stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Kade. "The first labor. Bring me the pelt of a winter wolf, taken from the high passes before the snow closes them. The second labor. Carry a hearthstone from the old quarry to the Blackthorn homestead, a distance of 12 miles without cart or horse. The third labor. Work a full season on the Blackthorn land, proving that you can provide for her." A murmur ran through the gathering. Kade heard Hessa draw a sharp breath. "The winter wolves are killers," she said, loud enough for the elders to hear. "They hunt in packs and they do not fear humans. And the hearthstones weigh 300 pounds or more. This is not a test, it is a death sentence." "It is a test of strength and commitment," Garruk said smoothly. "If the human cannot provide these things, he is not worthy of you." The scarred elder looked at Kade. "Do you accept the labors?" Kade met her gaze. "I do." "Then you have until the spring moot to complete them. The first 2 must be finished before the winter solstice. The third will be judged at the spring gathering." The elder raised her hand again. "The moot has spoken. Go in peace." The gathering began to disperse, but Garruk did not move. He crossed the space between himself and Kade in 3 long strides, stopping close enough that Kade could smell the leather and wood smoke on his clothes. "You will fail," Garruk said quietly, his voice pitched for Kade alone. "And when you do, Hessa will be mine. Torin promised her to me, and I will have what is owed." "We will see," Kade said. Garruk's smile was cold. "Yes, we will." The high passes were a 3-day walk from the Blackthorn homestead, through pine forests and across ridges of bare stone where the wind cut like a knife. Hessa insisted on coming, despite Marna's protests, and Kade did not argue. He had spent most of his life working alone, but he was learning that Hessa was not the kind of person who stood aside when there was work to be done. They traveled light, carrying only what they could pack on their backs: food, water, bedrolls, and Kade's hunting bow, a recurve made of ash and horn that he had bought years ago from a Fletcher in the south. Hessa carried a short spear and a knife, and she moved through the forest with the easy confidence of someone who had grown up in wild country. On the second day, they found the first sign of the wolves, a deer carcass, half eaten and frozen in the shadow of a boulder. The tracks around it were huge, each pawprint as large as Kade's hand. "Winter wolves," Hessa said, crouching beside the tracks. "At least 3 of them, maybe more." "How do you know?" "The size of the prints and the way they are spaced." "Winter wolves are larger than common wolves, and they hunt in coordinated packs." She glanced up at him, her amber eyes worried. "Kade, this is not a task for one man. Even orc hunters go after winter wolves in groups of 4 or 5. I am not alone, I have you. I am not a hunter. You are quick and you are brave and you are here. That is enough." Hessa stood, her expression caught between frustration and something softer, something that looked almost like gratitude. "You are a strange man, Kade Ashford, so I have been told." They made camp that night in a sheltered hollow beneath an overhang of rock, building a small fire and eating dried meat and hard bread. Hessa sat with her back to the stone, her spear across her knees, and watched the darkness beyond the firelight. "Why did you really agree to this?" she asked after a long silence. "Not just the vague answer you gave my mother. The real reason." Kade poked at the fire with a stick, sending up a spray of sparks. He had known she would ask eventually, and he had known also that she would not accept anything less than the truth. "When I was 10, my father died," he said. "He owed money to a carter, a man named Bren who ran a freight business in the town where we lived. My mother tried to pay the debt, but we had nothing, so Bren took me instead. He said I would work for him until the debt was settled, and then I would be free." Hessa said nothing, but he could feel her attention like a weight. "I worked for him for 5 years, Kade continued. Hauling freight, loading wagons, sleeping in his stable. He fed me enough to keep me alive, and he beat me when I was slow. When I turned 15, he told me the debt was paid and I could go. But by then, my mother was dead, and I had nowhere to go, so I stayed on as a hired man for another 2 years. When I left, I swore I would never let anyone own me again, and I swore that if I ever had the chance to stop it happening to someone else, I would. So when you saw me at the fair," Hessa said slowly, "you saw yourself. I saw someone who needed help. And you helped me, even though it cost you." "Yes." Hessa was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost uncertain. "I do not know what to say to that. You do not have to say anything, but I want to." She shifted, turning so she could see his face in the firelight. "You gave me a way out, Kade. More than that, you gave me hope that I could have a life that was mine, not something decided by men I do not trust. That is not a small thing, I know. Do you?" She leaned forward, her eyes searching his. "Because I am not sure you understand what it means to me. I have spent my whole life being told I was too small, too quick-tempered, too stubborn to be a proper orc woman. My father loved me, but he also wanted me to be something I was not. Safe, obedient, married to a man who could protect me. And now here you are, a human stranger who knows nothing about me, risking your life so I can be free. It does not make sense. It does to me." Hessa shook her head, but she was smiling now, a small, wondering expression. "You are impossible, Kade Ashford." "So I have been told." They found the wolves on the 3rd day, in a high valley where the trees gave way to open snowfields and the wind howled down from the peaks above. There were 4 of them, each one as large as a pony, their fur white as frost and their eyes pale blue. They were feeding on another deer, tearing at the carcass with teeth like daggers, and they did not notice Kade and Hessa until it was almost too late. Hessa saw them first. She grabbed Kade's arm and pulled him down behind a fallen log, her breath coming fast and shallow. The wolves were 50 yards away upwind, and for the moment they were focused on their meal. "We need a plan," Hessa whispered. "If they catch our scent, they will come for us." Kade studied the terrain. The valley was open, with little cover except for a scattering of boulders and the log they were hiding behind. The wolves were between them and the forest, cutting off the easiest route of escape. "I will draw them off," he said. "You circle around to the rocks on the left. When they come for me, you come at them from the side with the spear." "That is not a plan, that is suicide. It is the best option we have. The best option is to leave and come back with more hunters." Kade met her eyes. "There is no time. The snows will close the passes in a week, maybe less. If we leave now, we will not be able to return." Hessa's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "All right. But if you die, I am going to find a way to bring you back just so I can kill you myself." "Fair enough." Kade waited until Hessa had slipped away, moving low and fast toward the boulders, before he stood and nocked an arrow. He drew the bowstring back and aimed for the largest wolf, a scarred male with one ear torn half away. The arrow flew true, sinking into the wolf's shoulder, and the animal reared back with a snarl that echoed across the valley. The other wolves turned as one, their pale eyes locking on Kade. For a moment they stood frozen, weighing the threat, and then they charged. Kade ran. He ran flat out, his boots slipping on the snow, angling toward the rocks where Hessa was waiting. Behind him he could hear the wolves, their paws pounding the frozen ground, their breath loud and harsh. He risked a glance over his shoulder and saw them gaining, the wounded male falling behind but the other three closing fast. He reached the rocks and spun, dropping to one knee and drawing another arrow. The lead wolf was 10 yards away when he loosed, and the arrow took it in the chest. The wolf stumbled but did not fall, its momentum carrying it forward, and Kade barely had time to roll aside before it crashed into the boulder behind him. Hessa came in from the side, her spear flashing in the pale light. She drove the point into the second wolf's flank, and the animal howled and twisted, snapping at her. Hessa danced back, pulling the spear free, and struck again, this time catching the wolf in the throat. Blood sprayed across the snow, black and steaming, and the wolf collapsed. The third wolf went for Kade, its jaws wide, and he met it with his hunting knife, driving the blade up under its ribs. The wolf's weight bore him to the ground, its claws raking his shoulder, and for a moment they were tangled together, man and beast, both fighting for survival. Then the wolf went limp, its blood soaking into Kade's coat, and he shoved it aside and struggled to his feet. The wounded male was still coming, slower now but no less dangerous. Kade reached for another arrow, but his quiver was empty. He dropped the bow and drew his knife again, stepping in front of Hessa. The wolf lunged and Kade sidestepped, slashing at its side as it passed. The blade bit deep, and the wolf yelped and turned, slower now, its strength fading. Hessa moved in from the other side, her spear ready, and together they brought the animal down. For a long moment they stood there, breathing hard, the snow around them stained red. Then Hessa lowered her spear and looked at Kade, her eyes wide. "You are bleeding," she said. Kade glanced at his shoulder where the wolf's claws had torn through his coat and shirt. The wounds were not deep, but they burned, and blood was dripping down his arm. "I will live," he said. "We need to bind it before we start skinning." They worked quickly, using strips of cloth from Hessa's pack to bandage Kade's shoulder, and then they set about skinning the largest wolf. The pelt was heavy and thick, the fur so white it seemed to glow in the fading light. By the time they finished, the sun was setting and the temperature was dropping fast. "We need to get off this mountain," Hessa said. "If we stay here, we will freeze." Kade nodded. He was already feeling the cold seeping into his bones, and his shoulder throbbed with every movement. They packed the pelt and started back down the valley, moving as fast as they dared over the treacherous ground. They made it to the tree line by full dark and built a fire in the shelter of a pine grove. Hessa boiled water and cleaned Kade's wounds, her hands gentle but efficient, and then she rebandaged them with fresh cloth. "You fought well," Kade said as she worked. "So did you." Hessa's voice was quiet, almost uncertain. "I have never seen a human fight like that. I have had practice." "I can see that." She finished tying off the bandage and sat back, her amber eyes studying his face. "You could have died today, so could you? But you put yourself between me and the wolves. You protected me. That was the point." Hessa shook her head, but she was smiling, that same small, wondering expression he had seen before. "You are impossible, Kade Ashford. So you keep saying." They reached the Blackthorn homestead 4 days later, tired and sore and triumphant. Marna met them at the door, her face breaking into a rare smile when she saw the white pelt draped over Kade's shoulders. "You did it," she said, and there was wonder in her voice. "You actually did it." "We did it," Kade corrected, glancing at Hessa. Hessa flushed, the green of her skin darkening across her cheeks. "He did most of the work." "But you were there," Kade said, "and you fought. Do not diminish that." Marna looked between them, her smile widening. "Come inside, both of you. You look half frozen." "I will make tea, and you can tell me everything." The second labor began 2 weeks later, after Kade's shoulder had healed enough for him to lift heavy weights without tearing the wounds open again. The old quarry was a day's walk south of the homestead, a gash in the earth where generations of orcs had cut stone for hearths and walls and foundations. The hearthstones were massive blocks of granite, each one weighing 300 pounds or more, too heavy for any ordinary man to carry alone. Hessa came with him again, despite his protests. "You will need someone to help if you fall," she said. "And besides, I want to see this." The quarry was abandoned now, its walls overgrown with moss and vines, but the hearthstones were still there, stacked in rows like silent sentinels. Kade chose the smallest one he could find, a block of gray granite roughly 3 feet on each side, and crouched beside it to test its weight. It shifted when he pulled, but barely. "This is madness," Hessa said. "Even orc men use carts or sleds to move stones this size." Garruk said no cart or horse. "He said it because he wants you to fail." "Then I will not fail." Kade stripped off his coat and rolled his shoulders, feeling the pull of the healing scars. Then he crouched again, wrapped his arms around the stone and lifted. The weight was immense, crushing, and for a moment he thought he would not be able to get it off the ground. But he set his legs and pulled, and the stone rose inch by inch until he had it balanced against his chest. His vision grayed at the edges and his lungs burned, but he did not drop it. "Kade, you are going to hurt yourself," Hessa said, her voice tight with worry. "I am fine." "You are not fine, you are turning purple." Kade took a step forward, then another, his boots scraping on the quarry floor. Each movement was agony, each breath a battle, but he kept moving. By the time he reached the quarry entrance, his legs were shaking and sweat was pouring down his face despite the cold. "Put it down," Hessa said. "Rest. You cannot carry it all at once." Kade lowered the stone carefully, setting it on the ground with a thud that echoed through the quarry. Then he collapsed beside it, gasping for air. Hessa knelt beside him, her hand on his back. "You are going to kill yourself trying to prove a point. I am proving I can do this." "Why, who are you proving it to? Garruk, the elders, me?" Kade looked at her, at the worry in her amber eyes, and for the first time since he agreed to the labors he let himself ask the question he had been avoiding. "Do you want me to stop?" Hessa's breath caught. "No," she said, so quietly he almost did not hear it. "No, I do not want you to stop. But I do not want you to destroy yourself either." "I will not." "You cannot know that." Kade pushed himself upright, wincing as his muscles protested. "I have carried heavier things than this stone, Hessa, not in weight but in what they meant, and I am still here." Hessa stared at him, her expression caught between exasperation and something deeper, something that looked like understanding. "You are the stubbornest man I have ever met," she said finally. "So I have been told." It took him 3 days to carry the stone 12 miles to the Blackthorn homestead. He moved in stages, carrying it as far as he could before his body gave out, then resting and starting again. Hessa walked with him every step, carrying their supplies and water and offering encouragement when he needed it and silence when he did not. On the second day, his hands started bleeding from gripping the rough stone, and Hessa wrapped them in cloth torn from her own shirt. On the third day, his back seized up and he could not stand for an hour, and Hessa sat beside him and told him stories of her childhood to keep his mind off the pain. When they finally reached the homestead, the sun was setting and Kade's vision was swimming with exhaustion. He staggered the last few yards and set the stone down in front of the house, then collapsed beside it, too tired to move. Marna came out and stood over him, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "You carried it the whole way?" "Yes." 12 miles. "Yes." Marna crouched beside him, her weathered face softening. "You are either the bravest man I have ever met or the most foolish." "Maybe both," Hessa said. She was sitting beside Kade now, her hand resting on his shoulder. "Probably both." Kade closed his eyes and let himself drift, too tired to argue, too tired to think. He felt Hessa's hand on his shoulder, warm and steady, and he thought that maybe, just maybe, it had been worth it. The third labor was the longest and in some ways the hardest. Winter came early that year, the snow falling thick and fast, and Kade spent the cold months working on the Blackthorn land. He repaired the barn roof and mended the fences and split enough firewood to last until spring. He learned to coax the plow horse through the frozen fields and to keep the chickens alive despite the foxes that prowled the edge of the forest. He worked from dawn until dusk, and sometimes beyond, and he did not complain. Hessa worked beside him most days, and slowly, without either of them quite realizing it, the pretense of their relationship began to feel less like a lie. They fell into a rhythm, a partnership, and Kade found himself watching her when she thought he was not looking, noticing the way she laughed when the chickens escaped their coop, and the way her eyes softened when she spoke of her father. He found himself wanting to make her smile, wanting to ease the worry he saw in her face when she thought Garruk might still find a way to claim her. One evening in midwinter, as they sat by the fire after supper, Hessa turned to him and asked the question he had been waiting for. "Why are you really doing this?" she said. "And do not tell me it is because you know what it is like to be claimed. That is part of it, I know, but it is not all of it, not anymore." Kade was silent for a long moment, watching the flames dance on the hearth. Finally, he said, "I was sold as a boy to pay a carter's debt. I was treated like goods, like something that could be traded or used, and I swore I would never let anyone be treated that way if I could stop it. That is why I agreed to stand for you. But you are right. It is not the only reason anymore." "Then what is the other reason?" Kade looked at her, at the firelight reflecting in her amber eyes, and he felt something shift inside him, something he had kept locked away for years. "Because I think you are worth fighting for." Hessa's breath caught. "Kade. You are brave and smart and stubborn and kind," he continued, the words coming easier now that he had started. "You work harder than anyone I know, and you do not let anyone tell you what you are supposed to be. And somewhere along the way I stopped fighting for a stranger and started fighting for you." For a long moment, Hessa said nothing. Then she reached out and took his hand, her fingers lacing through his. "I think I started falling for you the moment you refused to let go at the fair," she said quietly. "I did not realize it then, but I know it now." Kade squeezed her hand, his throat tight. "What does that mean for us?" "I do not know, but I know I do not want to lose you." They sat there in silence, their hands clasped, the fire crackling between them. Outside, the wind howled and the snow fell, but inside the house it was warm and safe, and for the first time in his life Kade felt like he had found a place he belonged. The accident happened in early spring, a week before the spring moot. Kade was repairing a section of the barn wall that had been damaged by the winter storms, balancing on a ladder and prying loose a rotted beam, when the ladder slipped. He fell 15 feet, landing hard on his side, and he felt something crack in his ribs. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, stealing his breath, and for a moment he could not move. Hessa found him there, curled on the ground, his face white. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands shaking as she checked him for injuries. "Kade, talk to me. Where does it hurt?" "Ribs," he gasped. "Left side." She helped him into the house and laid him on the bed, then sent for Marna. Between the two of them, they stripped off his shirt and examined the damage. 3 ribs were cracked, maybe broken, and his side was already turning purple with bruising. "You need to rest," Marna said firmly. "No work, no heavy lifting, nothing that will make it worse." "The moot is in a week," Kade said. "I need to be ready. You need to heal. If you push yourself now, you will do permanent damage." "I do not have time to heal." Hessa, standing by the bed with her arms crossed, made a frustrated sound. Kade listened to her. "You have done enough. You completed the first 2 labors, and you have worked this land for a full season. The elders will see that. You do not have to kill yourself to prove anything more. Garruk will argue that the 3rd labor is not complete if I am not there to present it." "Then I will go to the elders and end the pretense," Hessa said. "I will tell them the truth, that I asked you to stand for me as a favor, and that I release you from the claim." "No." Kade tried to sit up, and the pain in his ribs flared so sharply he nearly blacked out. "No, Hessa. If you do that, Garruk wins. You will be handed over to him. And if you die trying to finish this, what good does that do?" Hessa's voice cracked, and Kade realized with a jolt that she was crying, tears streaming down her green cheeks. "I do not want you to die for me, Kade. I do not want that. I am not going to die. You do not know that. I know I am not going to let Garruk take you." Kade reached out and took her hand, ignoring the pain it cost him. "I gave my word, Hessa, and I meant it." Hessa sank onto the edge of the bed, her shoulders shaking. "You are the stubbornest, most impossible man I have ever met. So you keep saying." She looked at him, her amber eyes red-rimmed and fierce. "I love you, you fool. I love you, and I do not want to lose you." Kade felt his breath catch. "You love me." "Yes. I think I have loved you since you carried that stone 12 miles and then collapsed at my feet. Maybe before that. I do not know. But I know I love you, and I know I cannot let you keep sacrificing yourself for me." "Then, what do you want me to do?" Hessa was silent for a long moment, her hand tight on his. Then she said, "I want you to rest and heal. And then I want you to come to the moot with me, and we will face the elders together. Not as claimant and claimed, but as partners. And if they rule against us, we will leave. We will go somewhere Garruk cannot follow, and we will build a life that is ours. You would leave your clan. For you, yes." Her voice was steady now, certain. "I would leave everything." Kade looked at her, at the determination in her face, and he felt something loosen in his chest, something he had been holding tight for too long. "All right," he said. "We will do it your way." The spring moot was held on a clear, cold morning when the world was still half frozen, and the buds on the trees were just beginning to swell. Kade walked to the gathering place with Hessa on one side and Marna on the other, his ribs bound tight with linen and his movements careful. The pain was a constant throb, but he had felt worse, and he was not going to let it stop him now. The amphitheater was full again, The clan gathered to hear the judgment. Garruk stood before the elders, his expression confident, but when he saw Kade his eyes narrowed. "The human is injured," Garruk said loudly. "He cannot complete the third labor." "I have completed it," Kade said. His voice was steady, carrying across the amphitheater. "I worked the Blackthorn land for a full season as you demanded. The barn is repaired, the fences are mended, and there is firewood enough to last until next winter. Ask Marna Blackthorn if you do not believe me." Marna stepped forward. "It is true. Kade Ashford has worked harder than any man I have known, human or orc. He has proven himself 10 times over." One of the elders, an old man with a long white beard, leaned forward. "And the other labors, the winter wolf pelt and the hearthstone, both completed," Marna said. "The pelt is at my home and the hearthstone is set before my door. You may inspect them if you wish." The elders conferred among themselves, their voices too low to hear. Finally, the scarred woman who had spoken at the autumn moot raised her hand. "Kade Ashford has completed the 3 labors," she said. "According to clan law, the challenge is answered. Garruk's claim is void." A ripple of surprise ran through the gathering. Garruk's face darkened and he took a step forward. "This is not justice," he said. "Torin Blackthorn promised Hessa to me. I have witnesses." "Bring them forward," the elder said. 2 orcs stepped out of the crowd, both of them warriors from Garruk's band. They swore that Torin had made the pledge, that they had heard him with their own ears. But when the elder asked Marna if she had heard such a pledge, Marna shook her head. "Torin never spoke to me of such a promise," Marna said, "and he would have if it were true. He and I shared everything." "The widow's word against the warrior's word," Garruk said. "That is no proof." "But it is doubt," the elder said. "And under clan law, a disputed promise requires witnesses from both sides. You have only your own. Marna denies it. The claim is not valid." Garruk's hands clenched into fists. "Then I will take her by force." A shocked silence fell over the amphitheater. The elder's expression hardened. "You would violate clan law. I would have what is mine." Garruk lunged toward Hessa, moving faster than Kade expected. But Kade was ready. He stepped between them, ignoring the fire in his ribs, and caught Garruk's arm. For a moment they struggled, and then Kade twisted, using Garruk's momentum against him, and the orc went down hard on the stone floor. Garruk rolled to his feet, his face twisted with rage. But before he could move again, 2 of the elders' guards stepped forward and seized him. "Garruk of the Red Fang Band," the scarred elder said, her voice cold and final, "you have broken clan law. You are exiled. You have 3 days to gather your belongings and leave the borderlands. If you return, you will be killed." Garruk struggled against the guards, but they held him fast. His eyes found Hessa, and there was nothing but hatred in them. "This is not over," he snarled. "It is," Hessa said quietly. "Leave, Garruk, you have lost." The guards dragged him away, and the amphitheater erupted in a babble of voices. The elder raised her hand again, calling for silence. "The moot has spoken," she said. "Hessa Blackthorn is free to choose her own path, and Kade Ashford has proven himself a man of honor. Go in peace." The gathering dispersed slowly, the orcs talking among themselves, casting curious glances at Kade and Hessa. Marna embraced her daughter, then turned to Kade and clasped his hand. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." "I did what anyone should have done," Kade said, "but you were the only one who did." Marna smiled. "You are welcome in my home, Kade Ashford, for as long as you wish to stay." Over the next few months, Kade's ribs healed, and the spring turned into summer. He and Hessa spent long days working the land, planting crops and tending the animals, and long evenings sitting by the fire and talking about the future. Marna watched them with a knowing smile, and one evening she pulled Kade aside. "There is an old homestead in the hills," she said. "It has been abandoned for years, but the land is good and the house can be repaired. If you and Hessa want a place of your own, it is yours. You would give us land. I would give you a chance to build a life together. You have earned that." Kade and Hessa walked up to the homestead the next day. It was small, just a single-room house built of stone and timber, with a barn that was half collapsed and a field overgrown with weeds. But the bones were good, and the view from the hillside was beautiful, looking out over the valley and the forest beyond. "What do you think?" Kade asked. Hessa turned to him, her amber eyes bright. "I think it is perfect." They spent the summer repairing the house and clearing the field. Kade rebuilt the barn and Hessa planted a garden, and slowly the homestead came back to life. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the hills, and Kade would think about how far he had come from the boy in the carter's stable. On a warm evening in late summer, as the fireflies danced in the grass, Hessa took Kade's hand and led him inside. The house was simple but clean, with a table and chairs and a bed they had built together. And in the center of the floor, set into the hearth, was the stone Kade had carried 12 miles from the old quarry. "I asked my mother to help me set it," Hessa said. "I thought it belonged here." Kade looked at the stone, at the way the firelight played across its gray surface, and he felt a lump rise in his throat. "It does." Hessa stepped closer, her hand still in his. "Kade, I know we started this as a pretense, but it stopped being a pretense a long time ago, at least for me." "For me too. Then I want to make it real. I want us to light our first fire together in our own home, and I want to call you my husband." Kade pulled her into his arms, holding her close despite the twinge in his ribs. "I want that too." They knelt together by the hearth, and Hessa lit the fire with flint and steel. The flames caught and grew, warming the stone, and Kade thought of all the miles and all the labors that had brought him to this moment. He thought of the orc girl who had kissed a stranger at a horse fair and whispered, "Please do not let go," and he thought of the promise he had made without knowing where it would lead. "I will never let go," he said quietly. Hessa looked at him, her eyes shining. "I know." They were married the next day, in a small ceremony with Marna as their only witness. They spoke their vows in the old way, with clasped hands and promises of loyalty and love, and when it was done, Marna kissed them both and left them to their new life. The years that followed were not easy, but they were good. Kade and Hessa worked the land together, building a farm that grew a little larger and a little more prosperous each season. They faced harsh winters and dry summers, and once a wildfire that nearly destroyed everything they had built. But they faced it together and they endured. In the 3rd year, Hessa gave birth to a daughter. They named her Vera, and she had her mother's green skin and her father's quiet determination. 2 years later, a second daughter came, smaller and quicker, with amber eyes that missed nothing. They named her Lyra. Kade watched his daughters grow, teaching them to work the land and to be kind, and to stand up for what was right. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, he would tell them the story of how he met their mother, of the kiss at the horse fair and the whispered plea and the labors that followed. "Did you know you would marry her?" Vera asked once when she was old enough to understand. "No," Kade said. "I only knew she needed help. But you loved her. Eventually, yes. But love is not just something you feel. It is something you choose every day, even when it is hard." Vera thought about that, her small face serious. "I think you are a good man, Papa." Kade smiled and pulled her into a hug. "I am a lucky man, and that is what matters." Hessa, sitting by the hearth with Lyra on her lap, looked up and caught his eye. She smiled, the same small, wondering expression he remembered from their first days together, and Kade felt his heart swell. They had built a life together, he and the orc girl who had kissed a stranger and asked him not to let go. And he never had. Marna lived another 15 years, long enough to see her granddaughters grow into strong, capable young women, and to know that the homestead she had given Kade and Hessa was thriving. When she died, it was peacefully in her sleep, and they buried her in the hills she had loved. Garruk was never seen again in the borderlands, though travelers sometimes brought stories of an orc mercenary in the southern kingdoms who bore a striking resemblance. Kade heard the stories but did not care. Garruk was part of a past that no longer mattered. The homestead became a place of peace, a small farm where humans and orcs could meet without suspicion or fear. Kade and Hessa welcomed travelers, offering food and shelter, and their daughters grew up knowing that kindness and courage were worth more than any amount of gold. On a warm autumn evening, many years after the labors and the moot, Kade and Hessa sat on their porch and watched the sun set over the valley. Their hair was shot with gray now, their hands roughened by years of work, but their love had only deepened with time. "You ever regret it?" Hessa asked, her hand in his. Agreeing to stand for me, Kade looked at her, at the woman who had changed his life with a desperate kiss and a whispered plea, and he shook his head. "Not for a moment. Even though it cost you so much, it did not cost me. It gave me everything I never knew I wanted." Hessa leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. The stone from the old quarry still sat in their hearth, holding the fire that warmed their home, and Kade thought of all the miles he had carried it, all the pain and exhaustion, and he knew he would do it again without hesitation, because some things were worth fighting for. Some things were worth carrying, no matter how heavy, and some people, once you found them, you never let go.